What if the silent thief of health is no longer waiting for old age to strike, but is now walking the hallways of our high schools and sitting in our university lecture halls? For generations, type 2 diabetes was known as adult onset diabetes, a condition reserved for the later chapters of life. But today, that name is obsolete as children and young adults face a metabolic crisis of unprecedented proportions. Today, we are uncovering the shocking truth behind why the youth of today are facing a disease of the future and how we can stop this metabolic clock before it runs out of time. To truly understand why the youth are being diagnosed with metabolic diseases at record rates, we must first look at the invisible war happening inside their cells. Our biology evolved over millions of years to survive in an environment of scarcity, where food was hard to find and physical exertion was mandatory. In that world, the body became a master at storing energy. Today, we live in a world of biological abundance, yet our DNA hasn't changed. We are using ancient software to run modern hardware, and the system is crashing. This is the core reason behind the youth diabetes epidemic. The primary driver is the sugar saturation of the modern world. In previous generations, sugar was a luxury, a treat reserved for holidays. Today, sugar is an infrastructure. It is hidden in bread, sauces, yogurts, and even healthy granola bars. For a young person, the exposure to high fructose corn syrup begins literally in the high chair. When a child or teenager consumes these refined carbohydrates, their blood glucose levels spike to unnatural heights. The pancreas, a small but vital organ, responds by pumping out massive amounts of insulin. Insulin is the key that opens the doors of the cells to let the sugar in. However, when those doors are pounded on 5, 6, or 7 times a day by a flood of insulin, the cells eventually do something radical. They change the locks, they become resistant to the signal. This is insulin resistance, the precursor to type 2 diabetes. In young people, this resistance is developing faster because their bodies are being bombarded with higher concentrations of sugar at a much more frequent rate than any generation in human history. But the diet is only half of the story. We must look at the digital sedentary trap. Human metabolism is designed for movement. In fact, our skeletal muscles are the largest sink for glucose in the body. When we move, walk, or play, our muscles pull sugar out of the bloodstream to use as fuel, often without even needing insulin. But the leisure time of the youth has undergone a digital transformation. Where teenagers once roamed neighborhoods, they now roam digital landscapes. Every hour spent sitting is an hour where glucose remains stagnant in the blood vessels, irritating the delicate lining of the arteries and forcing the pancreas into a state of chronic overwork. This lack of glucose clearance through physical activity means that even a moderate amount of sugar becomes toxic because the muscles are not active enough to burn it off. Furthermore, we must address the circadian disruption. The blue light emitted by smartphones and laptops late at night does more than just keep a teenager awake. It actually alters their blood chemistry. Exposure to blue light suppresses melatonin, but it also triggers a slight rise in cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone that tells the liver to dump more sugar into the blood for energy. When a young person stays up late scrolling through social media, they are creating a metabolic environment of high stress and high blood sugar, all while lying perfectly still. Chronic sleep deprivation is now one of the leading predictors of insulin resistance in young adults. Even a single week of restricted sleep can make a healthy 20-year-old's body process sugar as poorly as someone twice their age. We also cannot ignore the environmental toxin factor. We are the first generations to grow up in a world filled with endocrine disrupting chemicals. From the plastics in our water bottles to the pesticides on our produce, these chemicals can mimic hormones and interfere with the delicate signaling of the pancreas and thyroid. For a young person whose hormonal system is still developing, these obesogens can actually program their fat cells to grow larger and become more resistant to weight loss, making the path to diabetes even steeper. The psychological weight of the modern world also plays a role. We are seeing a stress-diabetes connection in youth that was previously unrecorded. High-pressure academic environments and the constant social comparison of the internet keep the nervous system in a state of fight or flight. When the body is stressed, it prioritizes immediate sugar energy over long-term repair. This means that even if a young person is eating a standard diet, Their internal stress levels are keeping their blood sugar at a baseline that is far too high. They are essentially stressing themselves into a diabetic state. The implications of this epidemic are staggering. When a person is diagnosed with diabetes at age 60, they may have 20 years of management ahead of them. When a child is diagnosed at age 12, they are looking at 60 or 70 years of potential complications. We are talking about decades of strain on the heart, the kidneys, and the eyes. This isn't just a health issue, it is a human rights issue. We are stealing the vitality of the next generation before they even reach adulthood. However, the most important part of this conversation is hope. Unlike type 1 diabetes, which is an autoimmune condition, type 2 diabetes in young people is largely a disease of environment, and environments can be changed. The young body is incredibly resilient. It wants to be healthy. When we remove the constant bombardment of refined sugars and reintroduce the medicine of movement, the body can begin to unlock the cells again. We are seeing remarkable cases of diabetes reversal in young adults who commit to a whole foods, high protein lifestyle. To save the youth, we must implement a metabolic first education. We need to teach young people how to read a nutrition label, not for calories, but for added sugars. We need to teach them that fat is not the enemy. It is the refined white carbohydrates that are the true villains. We need to encourage muscle-centric medicine, where lifting weights and building lean tissue is seen as a shield against disease. A muscular body is a metabolically flexible body. It can handle the occasional treat because it has the machinery to process it. We must also reclaim the night. Turning off screens 2 hours before bed and prioritizing 8 hours of sleep is not a lifestyle choice. It is a medical necessity for blood sugar control. We need to encourage time-restricted feeding, or simply the no snacking rule. By giving the gut and the pancreas a break of 4 to 5 hours between meals, we allow insulin levels to drop, giving the body a chance to tap into its fat stores and repair its cellular receptors. In summary, the reason young people are getting diabetes is because we have built a world that is fundamentally at odds with human biology. We have traded the playground for the screen and the garden for the factory. But the power to change this lies in our daily choices. We can choose to be the generation that stops the clock. We can choose to view food as information and movement as a celebration of life. Diabetes in youth is a warning sign from our biology that we have strayed too far from our roots. It is time to come back. It is time to nourish the next generation with real food, real movement, and real rest. Our future depends on it. This metabolic crisis is not an accident. It is a consequence. But every consequence has a solution. By understanding the why behind the rise in youth diabetes, we can equip ourselves with the how to fight back. Let's protect our future by reclaiming our health today.